Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. You've probably heard this story a million times. When huge political shifts happen, like Brexit or the election of Donald Trump, there's always one simple explanation that gets tossed around: nostalgia. The idea is that a massive group of people was just consumed by this desire to go back to some perfect, imaginary good old days. But hang on, is it really that simple? Is that the whole story? It feels a little too easy, right? Like a convenient label we slap on things we don't quite get. Is our relationship with the past just some sentimental daydream, or is there something much more active and, frankly, much more interesting going on? What's fascinating is how the blame game has shifted over time. Back in the 1980s, the people being accused of nostalgia were the leaders themselves, folks like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. They were the ones supposedly stuck in the past. But fast forward to the 2010s and the story completely flips. Now it's the voters who are supposedly lost in a nostalgic haze, being easily manipulated by clever politicians. So here's where we need to pump the brakes and challenge that whole idea. The common myth is that looking back is an escape. It's about rejecting right now. But what if the reality is the total opposite? What if the past isn't an escape hatch, but a launch pad? What if it's the very thing we use to create the future? And to really dig into this, we're going to turn to Tobias Becker's fantastic book, Yesterday, A New History of Nostalgia. It gives us a whole new lens to see this phenomenon in a completely different light. Okay, so I want you to picture this. The year is 1969. We're at the absolute peak of 60s counterculture, peace, love, Woodstock. This was supposed to be the definitive moment when a new generation made a clean break from everything that came before. So, riddle me this. Why, at this festival celebrating the future, was one of the most popular acts a bunch of guys dressed up like 1950s greasers singing doo-wop? I'm talking about Sha Na Na. And get this, they performed right before Jimi Hendrix delivered his iconic world-changing set. How does that make any sense? Well, what you're seeing there is something called the retro engine. It's this powerful cultural force that doesn't use the past to run away from the present. It grabs pieces of the past and uses them as raw material to build something totally new. And this distinction is absolutely key. When we talk about nostalgia, we mean that passive, sentimental feeling, that warm, fuzzy memory. But retro? That's something else entirely. Retro is active, it's ironic, it's creative, it's about remixing past styles for today. Sha Na Na wasn't nostalgic for the 50s. They were a retro act, using the 50s to make a statement in 1969. You see this pattern again and again. A perfect example is the birth of punk. So in the 70s, designers like Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren got obsessed with 1950s teddy boy fashion. They started making and selling this retro clothing. And out of this backward-looking impulse came punk rock, one of the most forward-looking, revolutionary movements of the 20th century. It proves that looking back can actually propel you forward. Okay, so we're starting to see what's happening, but the bigger question is why? Why do we do this? What's the underlying system that keeps making us glance over our shoulder as we're racing into the future? This quote from a 1972 documentary really just hits the nail on the head. Orson Welles observed that the shock of the future and the comfort of the past, well, they're not separate feelings. They are completely connected, two sides of the very same coin. This idea was perfectly captured in Alvin Toffler's huge 1970 bestseller, Future Shock. He came up with that term to describe a very real psychological state, that feeling of stress and disorientation you get from too much change in too short a period of time. It's not just you, it's a systemic pressure that builds as life gets faster. And boy, has it gotten faster. I mean, think about it. The Industrial Revolution unfolded over about 100 years. The information age, maybe 30. The digital age fundamentally remade our world in about 15. And now the baseline is just constant, relentless change. That's future shock in action. And that's the crucial link. The faster and more dizzying the future gets, the more we need to reference the past. Not as a place to hide, but as an anchor. It's that stable point we use to find our footing in a world that feels like it's spinning faster and faster. So if all this looking back isn't just a simple glance in the rearview mirror, then what's a better way to think about it? Becker offers us a brilliant and honestly a perfect visual metaphor, a kaleidoscope. Seriously, think about how a kaleidoscope works. It's not one single perfect picture of the past that you can go back to. Not at all. It's a collection of countless broken, colorful little fragments. And in the present, we're the ones turning the tube, constantly rearranging those bits of history and culture to create new, beautiful, and meaningful patterns. Patterns that help us make sense of the world right now. And that's the real power here. This way of thinking helps us see the past not as some dusty museum to retreat into, but as this dynamic, vibrant, endless resource, a toolbox that we all use, consciously or not, to build whatever comes next. So it really leaves you with one final big question. What if all this longing for yesterday? What if it isn't really about the past at all? What if it's the essential, creative, and deeply human way we find our courage to face tomorrow? For the full, long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy these explainers, please subscribe and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.